So it is a pleasure to be here and talk with you this morning. Our operational excellence journey at Duke Energy has been a fascinating one. And we are at a phase where we are using assessment, which is my primary role, as an accelerant to how we continue on the journey to operational excellence. So I don't want to talk about assessment without sort of going back and talking about why we're where we are and how we got here. And unfortunately at Duke, it starts with one significant event. Back in 2014, one of our power plants had a pipe failure under one of the coal ash repository ponds, and it spilled the coal ash into the Dan River just south of Virginia. 30,000 tons of coal ash went into the river, obviously polluted the river. There was no long-term damage to the river, but from a corporate reputation perspective is where so much of the damage occurred. We're a 100-year company, Fortune 250, like to think one of the leaders in the energy industry, and this was not our best day. Later that same year in 2014, we had an oil spill into the Ohio River. And so this was really the wake-up call. The fallout from the Dan River event, as you can imagine, was pretty far-reaching. Obviously, negative media coverage, customer outcry, environmental issues. The government, both state and federal, launched investigations. The EPA launched an investigation. And again, this was not what our company was built on. Our chief executive officer, our chief operating officer, still talks about this being one of the worst days in his career. You can see all the follow-on effects. There were actually criminal charges at a misdemeanor level, and we were put on a 5-year probation period for doing any work with the federal government. So again, a huge issue and not our best day. But it was the wake-up call. Something needed to change. Perhaps we had become complacent as being the operator that we thought we were, and what needed to change. And so our chief operating officer at the time knew that we needed to start down a path of operational excellence. And we did some benchmarking, put together some teams. First off, though, what are we trying to achieve? How do you make sure you get the right level of operational discipline focused on the results that matter? And this is the chart we've used, and it's nothing scientific. It's just a 4-blocker, making sure that we understood that we did want to balance the operational discipline, again, focused on results that matter. We considered ourselves at that time in 2014 sort of in that lower left quadrant. Our operational discipline wasn't where we needed to be, and our results were not good, performance lacking. 2015 and 2016, we actually kind of went up the results on the left side, but we knew that our principles and our practices and our discipline still wasn't where it needed to be. So we were sort of in the unsustainable quadrant on the upper left. The other thing to think about is when you put in place procedures and processes, do you swing the pendulum too far on the operational discipline piece and perhaps lose focus on the results that you're trying to achieve? And we operate 6 nuclear stations, which have a high operational discipline, as you can imagine, high government regulation from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And there is a lot of procedural basis, and if you swing too far there, you're sort of into the bureaucracy mode, and you can't be really sustainable there either. So again, our desired state was that upper right quadrant, the right amount of operational discipline focused on the results that matter to the utility, matter to our customers, matter to all of our stakeholders. So again, our definition is operational excellence is results plus operational discipline. And so we stated an objective at the time. The objective OpEx at Duke is to exceed stakeholder expectations by achieving the highest standards in safety, reliability, and affordability. This has morphed over the last couple of years. The affordability piece we worked back in because we cannot, again, we're still, many parts of our business are regulated, and we have to make sure that our costs stay in line with what our regulators expect and what our customers can afford. Again, as we started down the OpEx journey, we did benchmarking with obviously the chemical industry, oil and gas industry. You see some of the names here, Chevron, DuPont. We leaned heavily, again, as a large part of our operation is nuclear. We leaned into the nuclear organization with the Institute of Nuclear Power Operations. And we saw some common components across those, right? They all have standards, they all have training. They do some sort of evaluation, and we'll call that assessments as we move forward. And then there's got to be some support back from some central body, center of excellence or something like that. So with that, we developed what we called a scalable OpEx framework. And the reason we talk so heavily about scalability is that there are very different risks in different part of our businesses. We are a electric utility in 7 states of the United States. So we produce, transmit, and deliver electrical generation. We also have a gas distribution business. And at the time of this, we were actually in some international businesses that we have actually exited. But again, when we were rolling out the framework, we knew that every task, every role didn't need the same level of operational discipline. The example we like to use, and actually this is a power plant thing, but you may or may not know that actually hydrogen is used to cool electrical generators. It is very combustible. So when we're handling hydrogen, that is a very, very high risk operation, and it requires an extreme amount of operational discipline. However, we also have technicians who change out gas meters at a residential home. The risk there, even though it's gas, it's a different risk, and we need to make sure that our operational excellence practices are scalable to the risk that the organization can see or that the employee can see. I heard Jose's presentation a while ago, and he talked so much about culture. And obviously, innovation, as he pointed out, and as OpEx, as we're talking about operational discipline, is heavily steeped in culture. But how do you attack culture directly? We knew we couldn't do it that way. So again, we worked to develop a framework that would basically foster the principles that we knew were important. And over time of applying that framework, then the culture will evolve to be how work is done at Duke. This is our framework. I won't go into a lot of detail here. This will be shareable later if anybody's interested. Again, as we benchmark those other companies, some people would call this an operational excellence management system. We called management systems a little bit different in our framework, but we divide our OpEx framework up into 4 major attributes: accountability, management systems, employee tools and training, and then continuous improvement tools. Each of these 4 attributes are then broken down into 15 separate elements that you'll see here. Again, I won't go into all the detail, but just to point out that under the continuous improvement attribute, you will see assessment program as one of the required elements. And so that's what we'll be talking a little bit more as we move forward. Built on accountability, you'll see that in the pyramid graphic before, the culture of accountability is so important. And we developed this as our accountability model for Duke. I'm sure other companies have different accountability models, but it starts with the accountability in the center being the personal accountability of every employee, every leader. And then it is bolstered on the outside by leadership and organizations accountability, which is a continuous improvement cycle of plan, do, check, and adjust. Just a different way of saying PDCA, or maybe another way of saying it is working the PDCA model into actual accountability model. So again, this is the accountability model for Duke. When we started down the path, different business units within our organization said, well, we have our own accountability model. And so, as you guys know, as you're trying to move a large enterprise, some consistency at the top, some overall sponsorship to say this is the way we're going to do this is so important, and we were fortunate to have that at the time. The other part of the framework is, or another required element is actually the leadership imperatives, and you'll see some of the same words that Jose used here. You know, you want all your leaders to inspire our people, carry out the purpose of what your company, in our case Duke Energy, is all about. We are always looking to the future and need to be able to transform. Delivering the right results the right way is where we really dig into where we talk about operational discipline, doing the right thing the right way every time. And then obviously collaboration work as one. These leadership imperatives were already in place before we started the OpEx journey, but we made sure to include these as part of an integrated part of our operational excellence framework. And every leader in the enterprise has these as their imperatives, and they are discussed with their manager at every review cycle. So when we think about the framework, and there are 15 different elements, but you got to think back to our original objective, which is the highest standards in safety, reliability, and affordability. So we like to think that each element plays into all 3 of those. And the example we use is we have observations are required. We have a lot of highly technical work with technicians performing anything from high voltage work to, again, pressurized natural gas to operating a nuclear plant. And so it is required by our framework that leaders will be in the field observing those activities, making sure that our practices are being followed. But while we're there, the reason we want to think about this in the framework is while they're there, they should also be thinking about reliability. Is the task that's taking place the most reliable way to do it? Is it moving the enterprise to a more reliable product for our customers? And then also keeping in mind affordability. If they're out observing the human behaviors of that person doing the task, they also need to be engaging with that employee and finding, is there a better way to do it? Are there any barriers to them getting their job done? And then that, obviously, those barriers and inefficiencies tie right back to the affordability of our product to our customers. So again, we have to think about using those elements that affect all three of our major objectives of operational excellence. This is just another chart kind of showing a little bit of our progress since the initial event that I talked about in 2014. We started down a path of what we called EFO, event-free operations. That was really our focus. Stop having big events that we had in 2014. You'll see 15 and 16 is when we actually developed the framework, rolled it out across our major operational business units. We did stand up a program office in 2017. We started doing assessments in late 17 across 18 into 19. And then, as we've talked about, we'll talk about how assessments are currently being used and how we're using them and the way we report out up into the organizations. But this is sort of our timeline. So I mentioned this before, assessment program is what we call a required element of the framework. The 15 elements that I talked about for our operational units, they are required to be followed. And the assessment element itself can go anywhere from self-assessments of an operation of a business unit all the way up to a large independent operational excellence assessment that my group actually facilitates. So you'll see, again, required in the framework. This basically says, it's looking for unexpected performance gaps. It's looking to see, are you doing work according to the standards that have been established for your work, either by regulatory bodies, environmental permits, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, or perhaps by internal processes and practices that are focused on customer service, as an example. But it's all about looking for gaps, either to performance or gaps to standard is the way we talk about it. I did add one quote here from, obviously, some of our lean manufacturing. Don't look with your eyes, look with your feet. So this is our assessment model is very much about go see. Data is important and data informs where we go look. But when we get out there, again, we're looking with our feet by getting out into the field as much as possible. So now this is looking a little bit more at what I'll call the overall operational excellence assessment. The way we do this, and it's formed by an independent review panel. My small group of facilitators, we pull in experienced operational leaders from across the enterprise. So we'll pull in typically 15 to 20 operational leaders from all of our business units: nuclear, transmission, customer delivery, that's our distribution, the small wire guys, fossil hydro generation, information technology. So we get, again, seasoned, experienced operational leaders come in and serve as assessors of one of those particular business units. So we're right now still planning to go back out to our natural gas business unit. These guys operate pipelines, natural gas pipelines, all the way down to distribution to individual homes, right up to the meter of the natural gas coming into someone's home. So that is our current assessment we're planning. That assessment team will be formed again from operational leaders from across all of Duke. Again, the idea here is to see, one, when we first started, it is how are they applying the framework? Have they applied the framework? Are they using all the elements? Are those elements effective in affecting the objectives that they're trying to achieve? So those were initial baseline type assessments. We're now past that into cycle 2, and now we're looking more into those performance gaps. And the whole idea here is, again, focusing on continuous improvement, moving up that journey of operational excellence. The chevrons you'll see down at the bottom are really just how we consider our process. The preparation is all about looking at data from the business unit. What's their performance been like? We will then actually conduct an assessment. We'll write up a report. The business unit will get that report. They will be expected to respond with corrective actions, as we call them. And then we go back in later with a validation verification that they actually did what they said they were going to do and have those corrective actions been effective. So that's sort of the high level process of how we conduct the operational excellence assessment. One of the things that, and I did borrow this from the nuclear industry, if you haven't seen it, or at least that's where we saw it. When you think about assessments and oversight, which again is my role, we're trying to look for early signs of decline before they become huge performance gaps, right? And the earlier you find those, obviously you put corrective actions before they become big events. If you'll see here as you progress through, if you don't see those early signs of decline, then you could be leading into something more significant as an event. Through oversight of practices, oversight of your metrics and your KPIs, and assessments, you're trying to shorten that cycle and see those faint signals early so that they do not become events. What are those early warning signs? And that's the objective here. Don't wait for an event to happen to react and respond. Find the early signals that may be leading to an event. So that's why, again, we put so much emphasis on our assessments. I mentioned this before, but we put together teams of experienced operational leaders from across the enterprise. What this brings to us is a diversity of thought. They bring in very different perspectives. If you compare the way our customer delivery organization, these are the linemen that you see out on the poles. These are the guys that are responding during hurricanes like we just had. Their background is very different than that person who has operated a nuclear power plant for 25 or 30 years. However, they are both grounded in operational discipline practices, and any operational leader has those practices already ingrained in their experience base. And those are what we try to do, is leverage that experience and that expertise and now put it to the continuous improvement of the business unit that we're actually assessing. And I can tell you that there's real power in that diversity of thought. And we'll talk more about that in a second. But so our methods, as we mentioned, performance data review starts. You may be thinking right now, how long does this assessment take? We do it quickly. We basically cut out a 2-week time frame. The first week, actually more like 3 days, we'll bring in our assessment team. We'll train them in our methodologies. We will train them in how to do observations, how to document those observations, make sure that they know the difference between an opinion, perhaps, and actual fact. We really strive to say, if we're going to bring an example, if we're going to create an area for improvement for a business unit, it has to be based solidly in something that you saw or that you can point to, or something in the data. We like your opinions, but they have to be backed up by facts, basically. We want your opinions, actually. So again, we teach them how to do our process for structured observations. And another key part is obviously the interviews. When I saw Jose's graph of the happy people and the not so happy people, when you go out and pulse the organization, those happy people are the ones that are probably aligned all the way through the organization. But those unhappy people are possibly pointing to a problem in alignment to what the overall objectives that leader is trying to achieve. And we don't necessarily go looking for those people, but obviously if we hear from those folks, we will listen to that. And if we corroborate that with perhaps a performance gap, then that is going to be highlighted back to the leader as an area that they need to improve in. As I said, so that's the first week. The second week, we hit the field, typically 3 days of field observations. And again, we're in 7 states, so there is some travel involved. We go out for 3 days, we bring that team back, and we have a session that basically starts with trying to say, what did you see? And what are the themes that you saw? How do they compare back to the framework? What are the gaps in the elements, perhaps, that they should have been using that may have allowed this gap to actually happen? So that starts the report writing phase. We spend a half a day to a full day operating on those common themes. And then by Friday of that second week, we're basically writing what we call areas for improvement or strengths. The areas for improvement, again, have to be based on solid facts and examples of what we saw. It's not atypical to see an assessment team will come back, in our case, from Florida. Another assessment sub-team will come back from Ohio. they will have some observations that tie together to a common theme if there is a gap in that organization. And that's what we're really looking for. So again, we assemble that into a report. One of the key things that we've been able to fortunately have, and I saw that, Jose uses governance so importantly in the innovation chain. We have a strong governing body for our operational excellence, and that's what we call the Operations Council. Our senior exec of each of our operational business units report into this council. They meet every month. It is sponsored by the COO, and then he appoints a chair every year to actually lead that whole year. And that group is highly accountable for any operational issue across Duke Energy. So what we do on our operational excellence assessments, that is our audience. We give the report to the business unit that's being assessed. We also give it to the Operations Council. And the Operations Council then can both look at learnings from that assessment, perhaps for their own organization, but also to ensure that all of Duke Energy is benefiting from this assessment, and that business unit is accountable for those performance gaps that we may have highlighted, and that they're on a journey toward excellence. I don't want to, I go into a lot of detail here about these assessors and what we're looking for. I heard some of the same characteristics that Jose was talking about, but I pulled a couple of Malcolm Gladwell quotes here, because one thing you want is a passionate leader, no question about it. You want them to be an operational discipline and have some passion for continuous improvement. That's so important. But the other thing is that experience level that they bring, they may not be comfortable in the beginning translating that. It's not unusual for us to hear, if we're going into a fossil hydro station and it is a customer delivery, the wires folks, they say, well, this is the first time I've ever been in a power plant. And we say, that's okay, that's actually great, because what we need is that objective opinion. And it is not uncommon for one of those leaders to look at an activity that's going on and say, wow, that looks difficult to me, or that looks perhaps hazardous to me. And that independence of thought is so valuable to our process. So I talked about the journey. This is the way we describe the journey. It looked a little bit like Jose's 4 steps, but we do look at what we call on a 4-point scale. Again, when we're having events back in 2014, we call that, we need to get in shape and stop harming ourselves. So that would be what we call a level 1. Level 2, be better each year, is getting the organization into a continuous improvement cycle and continuous improvement mindset. Level 3 is really what we know that in order to be the best regulated utility, we've got to get to a level 3. But we also know that regulated utilities may not be around forever, and we've got to understand that we may need to be transforming to a different model. So that level 4 of OpEx is where we're looking outside the industry, our industry, to say, yeah, there's something going on in the sector that we've got to get to that level. Maybe we're comparing ourselves more, the classic, how are you comparing to an Amazon or a Google or something like that? But a level 3 is, we should be at a solid level 3. We are not in all cases, but again, this is our journey. And when we do the assessments, we actually do give, our teams actually give scores based on this 4-point scale right here on each element. It's primarily used as feedback to the business unit. We are tracking them over time, but it's not a hard and fast metric that we're going to incentivize or anything like that on. It's more of, are we moving forward on the journey? So looking back on having done this for a couple of years now, I wanted to say, well, what are some of the keys that have been vital to us in how we've done the assessment program? And the first thing, and I mentioned this a little bit before, is that executive sponsorship has to be there. And we have that through our current Chief Operating Officer and the Operations Council. They own the operations of Duke Energy. And we were fortunate to have a discussion from our CEO, Lynn Good, to the Operations Council, which again have these operational senior leaders in it. And she is looking for them to ensure that all operations within Duke are event-free and are focused on affordability and reliability, as we said in our objectives. And whereas she can rely on that operational group to operate, while she can look out forward and see what's the strategy for the company, what is shaping within government regulation that she needs to be aware of. And if we are dragged back into operational events that take the time of the whole senior leadership team, then she cannot focus on that strategy moving forward. And that's so vital for us. So again, the Ops Council is an enabler to the COO to make sure that operations are going the way they should go within Duke Energy. This quote I put on here about get on the dartboard. I mentioned that sometimes when you bring an operational leader in and they're not familiar with the business unit of which they're assessing, you'll hear some uncomfortable feelings, and they may not feel like they can add some value. And our COO kicks off every operational excellence assessment with a charge to the team, if you will. And one of the things he says, and it gives them a little bit of grace, is that I don't expect you to find the root cause of what you see, or I don't expect you to find the reason that it's there. What I need you to do is to get on the dartboard. I'm not asking for bullseyes out of this team. I'm asking you to get on the dartboard. And when you get on the dartboard, we hand that back to the business unit, and they are expected to then find the whys, or that why is this the way it is, and narrow that into the bullseye. And I can just feel when we're doing this charge to the team from our chief operating officer, there is a relaxation in the room because they know they've got grace. They've got grace to go out and look hard and find things, and they don't have to know all the whys as to why it's there, and they also don't have to find the solutions. So again, him giving that speech to them and saying get on the dartboard is so helpful in getting a team started on the assessment. We mentioned this a while ago. You want your assessors to have a continuous improvement mindset. Go find the gaps. That's what they're there for. And again, you've heard this in Lean and Six Sigma type circles. Problems are like gold. That's really what you're looking for. And you really want to find, and if you can find the things that the business unit isn't seeing for their own, then that is true gold because they didn't know it was there in the beginning. You got to have really good business unit engagement. And again, some of this engagement is sort of driven by the fact that this is endorsed all the way up to our chief operating officer, right? He also challenges the business units to say, okay, don't just roll over on what this assessment team is telling you, because you are going to have to go correct that. So if you don't understand it and you don't think the facts back that up, then he expects a healthy pushback. And this has been an interesting dynamic because as an assessment team, you're going to get some defensiveness on the business unit that's being assessed or from them, but that's expected as part of the process. There should be healthy dialogue because you don't want all that dialogue is doing is helping you narrow in on actually what that gap is and why perhaps it exists, so that business unit can then attack it after the assessment team leaves. The assessors, what are you looking for? Again, we borrow those from across our business units, and it has been, it's been such an exciting thing to see some of the growth of an assessment team. As we've done more of these, our facilitators and I are engaged in every one, and we start out thinking, oh my gosh, this team's not going to get there, but they get there every single time because their business unit leadership has put them in there for a reason. They know they have experience, they know they're passionate, and they know that they have credibility across their own organization, or they wouldn't have put them in the room. So that's important. The other thing we realize as an ancillary benefit is that every assessor that comes in and goes and assesses another business unit comes away learning and knowing more about the company. Again, if you've been a wires guy your whole career and you've never been in a power plant, your horizon just got broadened significantly. And so now this is an ancillary benefit. We didn't design it that way, but what a great developmental opportunity for a mid-level leader or even an upper-level leader to go out into another business unit and look for performance gaps that, again, that will help move Duke Energy along that journey to operational excellence. So it's been very, very powerful. The last thing is, the business unit has to be accountable for action. And again, that accountability is sort of thrust upon them by the Operations Council, and the Ops Council holds them accountable for correcting those areas for improvement. And again, that sustained oversight, again, by having a clear tie back to the Operations Council, we do have this ongoing sponsorship, and there is constant feedback as to are they on the way where they need to go? Are they seeing other gaps that they can be fed back into the assessment process for the next round, if you will? So how are we doing? these charts are just some performance, the way we measure some of our performance. The top two charts are all about safety and environmental performance. TICR is total incident case rate. You'll see it has declined during our period since we've started OpEx, and assessment is obviously not taking all the credit for this. The Operational Excellence Foundation fundamentals, along with a lot of hard work that had to come in the environmental arena following the Dan River ash spill that I mentioned. It carries over into safety as well. REE is what we measure in regard to reportable environmental events. You'll see a category 1 and a category 2 there. Category 1s are worse. That's where we get a lot of external media attention. You can see we haven't had any for the last couple of years. And again, category 2 is sort of that leading indicator. Perhaps it was just lucky that the oil didn't get to a storm drain, perhaps. But so our REEs 2s have been coming down as well, and so we're proud of that. Reliability, you'll see two things here. One is the reliability going up, and also our O&M being flat. So when we looked at reliability, we wanted to make sure that reliability, we weren't shooting for top levels of reliability of all of our assets. And this, I'll try to explain that a little bit, in that when you run a fleet of power plants, they're not all running all the time. Imagine your hot summer day, they're all running, but imagine your cool spring day, they're not all running. And so every asset isn't necessarily treated the same way, but they've got to be able to perform when you need them. So our reliability measures are structured across that. And so we have what we call a reliability index to make sure that we're not swinging the pendulum too far and saying we don't want top decile reliability numbers out of all of our assets. Now for the nuclear assets, we do, because they run pretty much all the time. And then the bottom right is our net promoter score. This is just this is our measure basically of customer satisfaction, and you can see that it's been increasing over the period as well. I will say this: we know this is a journey, and we're proud of these results that we show on this chart right here. But I will tell you that we've had 2 significant failures within our company over the last 2 years, and that is that we've lost 2 employees while they were at work for Duke. So I can tell you that the operational excellence team and all the members of the operations council take this very personally. And so we know that we've got areas where we haven't penetrated the level of operational discipline that we need, and also probably mid-level leaders who perhaps haven't gotten the amount of operational discipline applying in their own workforce that we need. So, we're nowhere near level 4 across the enterprise, and in some areas we know we're not at a level 3, but that is our continued journey. And again, we work on that every single day. So I think, Jose,